Hey everybody, Smart Silver Stacker here. Hope you're doing well. So I've been stacking junk silver coins for years now, and if you're not familiar with that term, what I'm referring to is US 90% silver coins minted 1964 and earlier, half dollars, dimes, and quarters. These coins are also sometimes referred to as constitutional silver, but the term junk silver originates from the fact that these coins, well, investors stack them primarily for their silver content and not for any numismatic or collectible value, because these coins circulated as money for decades, and many of them are not exactly in pristine condition. And also, a lot of these coins were minted over the years. But recently, I was wondering how many junk silver coins actually were minted. I knew the number was high, but I really had no idea how high. But that's the question that we're going to explore in this video, and some of the numbers might actually surprise you. But even more surprising than how many junk silver coins were minted is how many are actually left. Thanks for tuning into today's video, everyone. If you enjoy it and you get some value from it, please do smash that like button down below, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel, and if you want to stack some silver yourself, make sure you check out today's video sponsor, sdbullion.com. That is where I buy my junk silver, and there's a link down in the description, so check them out. So the site that I use to figure out how many junk silver coins were minted is called coinmintages.com. But they actually only have the individual years of coin mintages listed. So I figured I'd go ahead and add everything up and come up with a total to know exactly how many junk silver coins were minted in total. Now, to do this, I went back to data from the year 1892. That is the year that Barber dimes, Barber half dollars, and Barber quarters were first minted. For general purposes these days, most Barber coins will not actually be considered junk silver. When I first started stacking over a decade ago, you might occasionally find one mixed in with the other junk silver coins at the local coin shops, and you still might find one today, although they'll probably be very well worn. But even common date Barber coins that are in decent condition these days would probably fetch a higher price than other common date junk silvers. Some of the more recent stuff, like say these Washington quarters, or even these Mercury dimes. These are also old coins at this point, but they're not quite as old or as uncommon as the Barber coinage. But for the purpose of this exercise that we're exploring today, I wanted to go ahead and err to the upside in any calculations of the junk silver coin supply, just to give us a very high ceiling, at the highest end possible for how many junk silver coins exist, or at least once existed. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, why the number minted is probably actually much, much higher than the current day supply. But first, let's just examine the numbers. So if we add up all the mintages of silver dimes, quarters, and half dollars between 1892 and 1964, because that's the last year that common circulating coins were minted in 90% silver, we find that the total mintage for silver dimes is 9,796,590,322. Now, here we need to stop and talk briefly about face value. A dime, as you know, it has a face value of 10 cents. A quarter is 25 cents, and a half dollar is 50 cents. Now, when it comes to junk silver coins, face value is actually how we typically describe quantities, because the coins are somewhat interchangeable in this regard, and any combination of these junk silver coins that has a face value that adds up to $1 will contain approximately 0.715 troy ounces of silver. Similarly, a $1.40 face value of junk silver is equal to about 1 troy ounce, for those who prefer to think in round numbers that way. So what that means is that 4 quarters, or 2 silver half dollars, or 10 silver dimes, they all have the same amount of silver in them. So the total face value for the mintage of dimes was $979,659,032 face of silver dimes. Now, if we move on to quarters, the total mintage of junk silver quarters from 1892 to 1964 was 4,260,992,292 90% silver quarters. That comes out to a face value of $1,065,248,073 face of quarters in total minted. Next up, we got to finish with half dollars. The total mintage of half dollars between 1892 and 1964 is 1,536,472,533 total 90% US silver half dollars minted. And that comes out to a face value of $768,236,266. So if we add all of this up, we get the total mintage of junk silver coins at a face value of $2,813,143,371 face. And if we multiply that by the number 0.715, as we discussed earlier, that's going to determine how many troy ounces of silver all that junk silver contains. And that number comes out to just over 2 billion. And to be specific, it's 2,011,397,510 troy ounces of pure silver in all the junk silver coins that were minted between 1892 and 1964. Now, again, we're trying to set a very high ceiling here. So that number actually includes all the proof coins. It's not just the junk silver coins. It's just any coin that possibly could have been lumped into the supply of junk silver. And that might sound like a lot at first, over 2 billion ounces, but if we use today's silver price of around $29 an ounce, we can see that this is actually a fairly low number. It's about $58 billion worth of silver for all the junk silver coins ever minted. And, we live in an era in which it's not unusual for the US Treasury to borrow that much in a week. It's kind of a rounding error when it comes to corporate valuations or the level of systemic debt that exists in today's economy. Now, that fact brings two thoughts to my mind. The first is that silver at today's valuations remains incredibly cheap, but also kind of makes me realize that the number of these coins that were minted is actually not that high after all. Also, it is very important to keep in mind that this is a very high estimate for the number of junk silver coins ever minted. And it's almost certainly true that all of those coins that were minted between 1892 and 1964, they didn't even all ever exist simultaneously, because as these coins circulated, they got worn down. And when coins get too worn down, they actually get pulled out of circulation and recycled, especially back when they were made of precious metals. So many of those coins that were minted in the late 1800s and the early 20th century were probably melted down to make the later mintages, especially in the year 1964. That was a big year for these coins. It was the last year that the US Mint turned out silver coinage for circulation, and they did it in a big way. Because in 1964, there were over 2 billion silver dimes minted, over 1 billion silver quarters, and almost 500,000 silver half dollars just in that 1 year alone. And it's highly probable that many older and worn down coins were melted down and recycled in that final year of activity at the mint. But even more important to the junk silver supply question, that is how much still exists today, is the fact that the melting didn't stop then, because since 1964, there have been some major episodes of coin melting that have diminished the supply of junk silver drastically. One example of this is in the year 1980, when the spot price of silver soared to $50 an ounce. And during that silver bull market, a huge volume of junk silver coins were taken out and eliminated forever from the supply, as those who had hoarded them cashed in on their sudden surge in value as silver bullion. Take, for example, this old story posted at pcgs.com that references a 1985 interview with coin dealer Leon Hendrickson. He was the proprietor of a coin dealer called Silvertown, located in Winchester, Indiana, and he lived through the big 1980 spike in silver. And according to the story, Hendrickson himself was deeply involved in the silver melts, buying huge quantities of silver coins from customers and selling them in turn to refiners. "I was part of it," he remarked, "so I can't point the finger at anybody else. I was just as guilty as anybody else, but that was the way everybody operated then. That was just the way coin dealers had to do business. Hendrickson calculated that during 1979 and 1980, Silvertown alone processed thousands of bags of silver coins that were destined for refiners' melting pots. He pointed out, however, that while that period marked the peak of the great silver melts, it was really the culmination of a process that had started more than a decade earlier. For silver coins had been melted surreptitiously at first and later more openly since the 1960s. Now, I can't be certain here, but typically a full bag of junk silver coins is one that contains $1,000 face value worth of coins. So if that is what we're talking about here, he's saying that they sent thousands of bags off to the refiner. That means that this one dealer could potentially have eliminated millions of dollars in face value from the supply. So, those kind of numbers, it puts into context the $2.8 billion face value total mintage of these coins. Doesn't sound like very much anymore, does it? And Hendrickson was hardly alone in this coin melting frenzy. Another 1985 interview referenced in this PCGS piece was with Joel Cohen, a New York coin dealer. He estimated that all of the silver coins produced by the United States Mint, only about 1/4 survived the ongoing melts. He confided that he himself sold refiners $400 million worth of fabricated silver, mostly silver coins, during the 1-year period from July 1st, 1979 to June 30th, 1980. And, he commented, other guys were doing the same thing. All of the lower end silver stuff got melted, he declared. Any coins that wouldn't bring $35 an ounce or more at retail, there was no other point but to melt them. I remember one day melting 100 bags of 1963 Franklin halves, he related, and looking back, I'm glad I did. The most they bring today is maybe $6 a piece, and I guess at that point, I must have gotten $13 or $14 each for them as dead items. So let's for a moment assume that Cohen's assessment was correct and that in 1985, only 1/4 of all the junk silver had avoided the melts. That's almost 40 years ago, and we did have another big spike in silver back in 2011 when silver once again hit $50 an ounce. So almost certainly additional coins have been lost over the intervening decades between now and when that interview with Joel Cohen took place. The actual exact size of the supply of junk silver coins, well, it's likely going to have to remain a topic of speculation, but we do know two facts. First, the supply has shrunk considerably, and second, these coins, they will never be minted again, so the supply can only continue to shrink. And there are some signs of just how limited the supply of these 90% junk silver coins have become. One strong indicator is that during any period of heightened interest in physical silver bullion, these coins seem to go out of stock before anything else. Back in March of 2023, for example, when Silicon Valley Bank's failure triggered a fear of financial instability, physical bullion was suddenly very desirable. But junk silver? Well, this stuff was nowhere to be found, and when you could find it, you had to pay exorbitant premiums. By May of 2023, 90% US silver coins were fetching premiums of up to 50% over the spot price of silver. Now, since that time, the premiums on junk silver have fallen considerably, so I view now as an opportune time to acquire some of these because given the dynamics in the market for these coins, that is a shrinking supply that will never again increase, my forecast is that at some point here, the premiums could shoot up again, and this time they might not be coming back down. I'd like to know what you think about junk silver coins. How many do you think could be left? Again, it's a topic for speculation, so leave me a comment down below to let me know what you think. Thanks for watching, everybody. Are you stacking junk silver? Let me know. Stay safe and happy stacking. Smart Silver Stacker,